Welcome back. In this lecture, we are going to understand about Terraform providers in a deeper level. So Terraform providers are the heart of Terraform. So why they are called heart of Terraform? So let's see in a visual manner what does that mean. Okay. So as a Terraform admin on my local desktop, I will install the Terraform CLI. And then for providers, so whenever I say I have written a configuration about Terraform, and then whenever I say Terraform init, means like I define the provider information in my configuration, and whenever I say Terraform init, it will contact the Terraform registry and then download that respective provider to my local desktop. So let's consider my provider is a AWS provider. So that respective AWS provider will be downloaded to my local desktop in .terraform folder inside my working directory. So we will validate our respective Terraform configurations and also execute the Terraform plan. And whenever we do the Terraform apply, it is going to call the equivalent AWS APIs. So it in the sense here, which is nothing but the AWS provider, right? So it has nothing to do with the Terraform CLI. So AWS provider, whatever you have downloaded, that respective provider is going to connect to AWS APIs or call the AWS APIs to provision the resource whatever you have created. So which means like this respective, whenever you say Terraform apply or Terraform plan, this respective provider will communicate with the AWS APIs, and those AWS APIs will provision the EC2 instance. In the same way, whenever you say Terraform destroy, so automatically that respective, it will contact the AWS APIs, and using that AWS APIs, it will destroy the EC2 instance. So here the whole entire story, whatever is played, is with the AWS provider. Okay, so which means if you want to connect to AWS cloud and then provision your infrastructure, you need the AWS provider. It's the same case with other infrastructures like Azure or Google Cloud or on-premise infrastructure for some Kubernetes product or anything. So you need that respective provider to be defined in your configuration, so that whenever you say Terraform init, it will download that provider, and using that provider only, it will contact the respective APIs of that respective resource and then provision those things. With that said, every resource type, example EC2 instance, is implemented by a provider. So without provider, Terraform cannot manage any infrastructure. So CLI is a static CLI. It has nothing to do here. Okay. So it need to have the provider to communicate with this respective destination cloud provider or any of the product. Are distributed separately from Terraform, and each provider has its own release cycle and also version numbers. So we have already seen when we are discussing in Terraform block about the required providers. So it has the source from where we need to download the Terraform provider, and also the version number of that respective provider. And finally, Terraform registry is publicly available, which contains many Terraform providers for most major infra platforms. Okay, so if you go here and then say Terraform registry, right, so you will find the registry, and there you will find as on today how many Terraform providers are available and then underlying modules are available. So you can see 776 providers and 5049 modules are available. So if you click on browse providers, so you can find the provider for AWS, provider for Azure, provider for Google Cloud, Kubernetes, Oracle Cloud, Alibaba. So like this, there are multiple providers available provided by the HashiCorp. Okay, and also the third-party providers. Now, if we go back, so the next thing here is Terraform providers. If we are mastering the providers concept, so we need to see in a three-dimensional way of what are provider requirements, provider configuration, and then dependency lock file. Okay, so if we know these three things on a detailed manner, I think the provider concepts is in our hands about understanding in a detailed manner. So provider requirements we already seen, which we have during the Terraform block, where how you provide the required providers with the name and then source and then version. Okay, so how you are going to define in your Terraform block. So every configuration, it is mandatory to define your Terraform providers in the Terraform block nowadays, so that it will be more of a production grade configuration file. Okay, so with that said, always whenever we are writing any Terraform configuration, we will first define our Terraform block and ensure that for this configuration of Terraform, means like if we have a use case, we want to create a EC2 instance. So for that EC2 instance, I need to have a AWS provider. And in addition to that, I also need something related to some random name generation. Okay, so for that I need some random provider. So those providers we define here in the required providers section. And next is provider block. Okay, so now you have defined the required providers in your Terraform block. The next comes is the provider block. Okay, so in the provider block, that respective AWS provider related configuration you define. Okay, example, in AWS provider you are saying that this provider will provision the infrastructure in the region US East 1 only. So that provider block will provide configuration at region specific level. In addition to that, you also defined here profile is equal to default, which means this provider will use the AWS credentials from your local AWS CLI of default profile, or you can give the access key and then access secret related parameters also in the provider block with static information, so that using that this provider will communicate with the AWS APIs in this respective region to provision the infrastructure whatever you are doing with Terraform. So provider requirements, provider configuration, and finally dependency lock file. Okay, so this also introduced in the latest 0.14 version, so which is nothing but .terraform.log.hcl. okay, so this will have the provider related information, version related information locked here. Okay, so which means you have a reference of your provider version here with including the hashes. If any changes happens, it is not going to allow. So we'll see in detail about these things in our upcoming lectures, but on a high level, so these three are the things which are more important from provider perspective. So one is provider requirements, another one is provider configuration file, and the other is dependency lock file. So the next thing here is required providers. Okay, so in required providers, you have provided a name here, which is nothing but the AWS. Okay, so this can be of any name. Okay, not only AWS. Recommended option is to use the name whatever is the preferred local name. Okay, but you can use any name here, AWS, my AWS, AWS1, or whatever it is. Okay, but if you see this is called the local name. Local names are module specific and should be unique per module. So Terraform configuration always refers to local name of provider outside the required provider block. So now you have defined the required provider in Terraform block, and if you want to reference that provider outside of this Terraform block, then using this name, okay, provider AWS, using this name only, you can reference that respective provider whatever you have referred. Okay, and users of a provider can choose any local name for it. Instead of AWS, you can use my AWS, AWS1, AWS2, whatever is the thing. But whatever you put here, my AWS, then same thing you need to reference here whenever you are referencing in the provider block. So here also you need to call it as my AWS. So recommended way of choosing a local name. So this local name, the recommended way of choosing a local name is to use a preferred local name of that provider. For AWS provider HashiCorp/AWS, so its preferred local name is whatever is seen here. Okay, so this AWS, so that's the reason we have used the AWS here also. Okay, so that is a recommended option, but if you want to use different names, you can use my AWS here and then my AWS here, and then it should work for you. So that's about the inside providers local name concept. Okay, and another thing is source. Okay, so from where this provider need to be downloaded. So it is the primary location where we can download the Terraform provider. So source address consists of three parts. One is hostname / namespace is HashiCorp / type. Okay, AWS. So you can see registry.terraform.io / HashiCorp / AWS. But in registry name is optional when we are using the Terraform public registry, right? And finally version, and then version constraints we already discussed in detail. So that's about these things. And another thing here is Terraform provider registry, right? So Terraform provider registry contains two things. One is providers and another one is modules. So both are available from registry.terraform.io. So if you go here and when you type out the Terraform registry.terraform.io, so you'll find like this. Okay, so you'll have providers and then modules. Okay, so modules are nothing but smaller functionalities which you can directly call. Example, VPC module, AWS EC2 instance module. So those modules you can call directly and then use in your Terraform code. So which we are going to see in detail when we reach the modules section here. Okay, so modules basics, and then we'll also build a module and then test it. Okay, but currently our focus is on providers, so we'll discuss about providers only, right? So now we will have something called inside these providers. So you have seen like providers for AWS, Azure, Google, and Kubernetes, and then different things. Okay, now these providers will have the provider badges. Okay, so which is nothing but official badge. These are owned and maintained by HashiCorp only. So let's see this. This is the official badge here you are seeing here. Okay, so I unchecked these things. AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, Kubernetes, Oracle Cloud, these things, whatever you are seeing here, all these things are having the official badge. If you see here, you can see official badge, which means these are owned and maintained by HashiCorp only, right? In the same way, you will have verified badge. These are owned and maintained by third-party technology partners, and HashiCorp has verified the authenticity of the provider's publisher. So if you remove these two, so you can see verified. Alibaba Cloud is a verified one, or whatever you are seeing, other things are having the verified badge. So you can see here, you are seeing the verified badge for Cisco DevNet, okay, ACI. So these are something called verified providers. In the same way, you will have one more, which is community providers are published to the Terraform registry by individual maintainers, groups of maintainers, or other members of the Terraform community. So we'll see only community providers. So you can see these all are individual providers or community providers who are also pushing their modules or providers to the respective Terraform registry. And finally, you will have something called archived providers or official or verified providers that are no longer maintained by HashiCorp or the community. You can consider it as older versions or whatever it is, archived. Okay, so these are something more these are the information we need to understand about when we consider a provider as one of the concept in Terraform, which is a core concept. Okay, so now with that said, we have discussed multiple things here from Terraform providers perspective. So in our next lecture, we'll go ahead and then implement step by step in understanding more about the providers. So if you see here, so in 03 Terraform fundamental blocks, so we'll focus on provider block, understanding it. We'll also understand about multiple provider configuration. We'll also understand about the provider's dependency log file. So these three things we'll have a practical examples and then implement them and then master it in a detailed way. So I'll see you in the next lecture. Until then, bye bye. Thank you.